Good afternoon or good morning, if that's what time it is where you are. We are here to talk about NextGen Pharmaceuticals, which is an opportunity that you've seen a little bit of advertising up until this point because you signed up for this webinar. We're happy to have you. Hopefully, you are an accredited investor because what we're going to be talking about today is an opportunity for accredited investors only. This is currently a 506C Reg D offering, so only accredited investors may invest. But thank you for joining us. This is going to be an educational, an investor-focused overview session of this opportunity. And before we kind of get into things, let me just do my required disclaimers. And there are six of them. So this presentation is for informational purposes only. It is not an offer to sell or a solicitation to buy securities. Participation is limited to verified accredited investors only, and any investment involves risk, including the loss of capital. Forward-looking statements may differ from actual results, so when we discuss those forward-looking statements, certainly keep that in mind. And we'd like to direct all the investors that are watching today to the official offering documents, which were available on the Raise page, which you should have information about. Now, kind of moving into what we're here to talk about today, what we're going to do is we're going to do a brief intro to kind of start, tell you who we are and why we're here. We're going to go into a presentation on the offering, the platform, and so that you understand not just what could happen with this company, but the unique way that the company is set up to be able to take advantage of those economic opportunities when they come. And then we're going to finish with a live Q&A that I will run with Jason. You are all welcome to enter questions for that Q&A during the presentation. Don't be afraid. We've already turned that feature on, so you should have the ability to do that now. And without further ado, let me introduce myself. My name is Ben DeScipio. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Texture Capital. We are the broker-dealer of record for this Reg D offering. We are a digital assets enabled broker-dealer that's been in effect since 2019. We do primary offerings as well as secondary offerings, and we also deal with, as I said earlier, tokenized securities. And without further ado, let me introduce you to our star of the day, which is Jason West, the COO for NextGen Pharmaceuticals. Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Ben. Good to see you again. My name is Jason West. I'm one of the founders of the business, and I've been involved since basically the very beginning, starting with the earliest research and going on through today, and oversee operations in both of our divisions on the pharmaceutical side as well as the nutraceutical side. So excited to tell everybody a little bit more about it. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. So, without further ado, let's move into the pitch deck presentation part of our presentation. We're going to start a little bit about identifying what the problem that we're solving here is. Jason, if you could kind of go into, the way biotech companies are set up today, there's a lot of risk involved, especially when you're dealing with pharmaceuticals that potentially could come up with trials. Talk about the structure of the company that you've kind of spearheaded and how that has kind of helped your efforts, at least financially, as you kind of move down the road towards pharmaceutical trials.
Yeah, you betcha. Let me just skip through a couple of slides here. And all these slides are available as well after the webinars in addition. Let me get to this slide here. It probably tells the story best of all in terms of our corporate structure, and it tells a little bit about maybe and I wanted to delve into a little bit of the why behind this. So starting from the bottom up, we have Genzata Pharmaceuticals, which is our pharmaceutical drug development company, and right beside it is Hyatt Life Sciences, which is our nutraceutical division of the business. And so, pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals are regulated very differently from one another, and we felt like this structure is the best for our purposes in terms of you know guaranteeing or forcing us to maintain financial discipline between the two businesses, and also allowing us to kind of keep our focus on the regulatory framework in each industry. And then immediately above that, I guess we kind of think of it as our parent company is Ionix Life Sciences, which is, and I think maybe this slide might do a little bit better to kind of explain what each one of these entities are. It may look a little bit complicated at first, but at the end of the day, Ionix is really all about tax planning and making sure that we have as much of a tax-advantaged structure for our investors as possible. So an investor in NextGen then is investing in ultimately the Ionix organization, and by definition, everything that goes on below it as well.
And this is an important point because we received a couple of questions after our last webinar
Mhm.
because people had Googled NextGen in Crunchbase and PitchBook, et cetera, and they hadn't found much. And the reason for that is that the company, the ultimate company that you're investing in is Ionix, which is kind of this umbrella entity that houses both Genzada and Hyatt, Genzada being the pharmaceutical side of the business, Hyatt being the wellness side of the business. And this is an important point. So you're investing in NextGen Scientific, which is set up as an investment vehicle to invest in Ionix Life Sciences. And then that in
Mhm.
turn holds your holdings in both Genzada and Hyatt.
Correct. Yes.
So now, in terms of you know, we talked a little bit about the risk on the pharmaceutical side and the fact that that wellness side is really bringing in revenue on a regular basis that then can be used to help that pharmaceutical side, kind of gives that the company a little bit of cushion in times that can sometimes be very difficult for a company to get through as they're going through trials. Um, Talk about kind of where you are in terms of timelines on those trials.
So, yeah, good question. We have two drugs that are in clinical trials right now. Let me go ahead and just pull that down a little bit just so we can see everyone a little bit more clearly. Our first drug, GZ17 6.02, is in phase 1B clinical trials right now. And so it's being studied right now in advanced prostate cancer. These are stage 4 prostate cancer patients. And in fact, actually, these are another wrinkle for these particular patients. They're castration resistant. So they've endured chemical castration. These are very severe disease states that these patients are in. And so consequently, it's a very tough set of patients from a drug standpoint. And we saw some early signals of efficacy and started looking at some what they call stable disease, which is a medical term to describe the arresting of the disease, meaning cancer is not growing, but it's not shrinking in those patients. And so good signals. We have still more to go, and a lot of the speed at which the trial is conducted is really driven by how quickly can you enroll patients. And because of the fact that the patient population is, I wouldn't say it's huge, but it's certainly not the smallest population. It just takes a little while to enroll those patients. And so that's kind of where we're at, is kind of mid-stride. And then on our another drug that we have is called GZ 21T, which is a topical drug. It's more for skin-related cancers and precancerous conditions. And we conducted our phase 1 clinical trial in Sweden already, and that was a great success. We saw no side effects from the product. And the next step is and we're almost complete with the approval from Sweden and the Netherlands to begin our clinical trial in a disease state called actinic keratosis. And that one is interesting. Actinic keratosis, or AK as they call it, is it's a precancerous condition, and people probably have seen this, a little bit of kind of red spots a lot of times on the forehead, areas that catch a lot of sun, and if left untreated, they do become oftentimes skin cancers of various different types. And so, if you can stop the AKs from advancing and remove them, then you've got yourself a drug. And in our case, we feel like there are drugs on the market. There are treatment methods already in place at the dermatologist's office for AKs, but those are pretty hard on the patients. And we think our drug can be both very safe and very effective, and doesn't come with all the side effects associated with the AK treatments that are out there right now. And so, if you can be safe and effective, and you offer less side effects, again, you've got yourself a drug, and that's where we believe we're headed.
Now, most of what you're doing, both on the Hyatt side as well as the pharmaceutical side, is focused on cancer. But that's not the only thing that your products help with. Like, for example, that the skin cream that you were just talking
Mhm.
about, that really is kind of targeted to precancerous conditions, also helps with issues like eczema and psoriasis and things like that.
Exactly. Yep. And ultimately, now you've started to kind of open up the known universe of potentially addressable market for that drug in particular. And there are hundreds of thousands of cases of various different kinds of cancer. There are about 60 million cases of AK a year in the United States alone. And then when you open up now into eczema and psoriasis, you're talking about well north of 60 million. And so that the numbers just start to grow and grow. Now, of course, there's also the fact of the matter is, at those high volumes, you may not necessarily be able to have quite as premium of a price as you might on, for instance, a cancer drug treatment. But that becomes a question of effectiveness and the math associated with volume versus more of a specialty treatment. But those are problems that we'd love to solve and
Exactly.
love to deal with someday for sure.
Absolutely. And we are talking about a really monumental market opportunity, aren't we? Really, a combined $3.3 trillion market that we're looking to disrupt here. 400 billion on the wellness side alone, which is exciting. And let's talk just a little bit about the wellness side, because I think the piece that always intrigues me the most is how much you're selling already without any marketing at all.
So it's interesting. Our nutraceuticals division, we really kind of started that, I guess, or we got into nutraceuticals because we felt like we can be helpful in that arena as well. Our main focus was and remains still pharmaceuticals, and we felt like we can be additive to the oncology space. In the meantime, because our research just led us to that point, we did start producing these nutraceuticals, which have helped a lot of people in that space alone. And yeah, so we're right around, I think, 1.7 million in top line revenue. Still small in terms of what we're accustomed to, but as you said, that's really with zero marketing. It's been all grassroots and word of mouth thus far. And so essentially we're really just focused on maintaining and building a good reputation in the nutraceuticals industry, where, to be quite frank, there are a lot of folks that don't have a very good reputation. And so we want to be different. We want to be science-based, and offer people a real solution to the real problems that they have.
That's fantastic. And that $400 billion opportunity on that wellness side is a remarkable opportunity. You and I were talking about kind of use of funds, and I know on this Reg D raise, you have only about $100,000 that are kind of earmarked towards the Hyatt marketing. And the anticipation is that $100,000 is going to actually do quite a bit, isn't it?
For sure. And I just sharing this slide just to have something for people to refer to and look at. This is kind of how we view the use of the funds is obviously primarily focused on our drug discovery and development. So the largest here, and I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but little under half is devoted to 6.02, and then a very nice sized chunk here devoted to our topical drug. And then really just a very slim portion is earmarked for our nutraceutical marketing efforts. And so this is kind of, I hope it tells the story adequately well that we can devote a little bit of resources to our nutraceuticals division for marketing. And the goal there is actually to grow the cash flow in that particular division. And that helps then us become more of a self-sustaining organization. So we don't have to continue to go out and raise capital to fund our drug discovery and work and development. Because obviously, as everyone knows, drugs are not cheap. They're very expensive to develop. And we feel like the nutraceuticals can fuel that part of our business very adequately. We just have to work on the sales and distribution portion of the nutraceuticals division.
Expensive to develop, but potentially very lucrative once they come through.
For
And
sure.
let's talk a little bit about that because we're establishing value, we're establishing kind of market opportunity here. And for those of you who were listening, yes, it was a 3.3 trillion dollar market here, and only 400 billion of that was on the nutraceutical side, which leaves $2.9 trillion as the addressable market on the pharmaceutical side. It is very large. Now, back in 2021, your pharmaceutical side was given a valuation by a third party, a well-respected third party observer in the vertical. And what was that valuation? It was approximately 312 million. I want to say.
Correct. Yeah. Actually, I think it was more recent than 2021 even, but yeah, the 312 was based on kind of how far we had gotten thus far, achieving the milestones that we had achieved at that point. And obviously, as you go along the development pathway, the big valuation inflection points are really, you can also think of them as points along the development path where you have de-risked that drug a little bit further and a little bit further. And why is it so important to de-risk it is because from a large pharmaceutical standpoint, you always hear stories in the news media about big pharma bought small pharma's asset or bought their company and so forth. And that is a really, really common scenario. And that's one where, it's certainly a potential exit path and strategy for us as well. Big pharma, Merck, Pfizer, GSK, what have you, they see and follow and watch companies like ours. And then once they get to a point that the drugs that our companies like ours have developed it to a point where it's a more sure bet that it will in fact achieve FDA approval, that's when they'll purchase. It's interesting. It's very similar to betting on the horse almost at the end of the race. And so they're willing to pay more for that ticket, that betting ticket, even though it's late in the race because it is a more certain bet. And it's a little bit kind of strange because you think of oftentimes of companies wanting to buy at a cheap valuation, but that would require them to absorb a lot of that risk. And so companies like ours, we absorb that risk, take it on, and work our way through it. And then hopefully we see interest from big pharma later on.
And let's talk a little bit more about kind of exit strategy and milestone points along the way, and what that can mean for investors. Since we have a lot of investors with us today who
Mhm.
are likely mulling over the potential of investing in this opportunity. These are the things that mean something to them. Let's talk about, and before we do, just a quick disclaimer again that these are all forward-looking statements. There's absolutely no guarantee that offers offers will come in or that we will accept them. However, let's discuss kind of certain inflection points that can affect value for an investor.
Certainly, on the pharmaceutical side, it probably is best characterized as completion of a study. But then in between there, you also have, I would call these kind of sub mileposts along the way as well, where you get good data back on a particular subset of patients. You see stable disease, you see cancer tumor regression, partial response, complete response in your trials. Those are things that because of the way that the clinical trials are designed, they're designed to be very difficult. And so, you've got a high hurdle rate like what we have when you can achieve some of those partial responses or complete responses, or even, as I mentioned, stable disease. Those are considered big wins in the oncology space. And so each point along the way is where we start thinking about that being a value inflection point. And also, especially in the case of completion of a phase study, a phase 1B, for instance, that is the time in which that data comes back. It's scrubbed, it's certified, and packaged, and then presented to the public. And that's when you could see a company, a large pharma company, come in and start to express interest. So that's really where we are headed and where we are keeping our focus every day.
We talked about them betting on the horse just before the end of the race. Let's talk about where we are in that potential timeline. Like, how
Mhm.
close could we be to that event where they're buying the ticket for the win just prior to the end of the race?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a tough question to answer because you never know how quickly you're going to complete those clinical trials. You hope that you have a pretty linear path, and you hope that you have a pretty regular patient accrual rate. But sometimes it doesn't always work like that. You just really the patients come to you as they come, and so there's not really a good way to estimate that. But I would say back of the envelope, 21T as a topical drug is a much easier drug. Just topicals in general are a much easier drug to evaluate for purposes of success and side effects. There's no imaging typically that needs to go along with it, which extends time, extends cost, and so forth. You can really just look at the skin and determine whether or not there are fewer or greater or the same number of lesions. And so it is commonly viewed as a much quicker route to commercialization in the topical space. So best guess for me on the topical would be, I think we are 2 years approximately before we're able to commercialize that drug. And that's most likely, again, to occur with a larger dermatologic focused drug company. And we have connections with several already, so those conversations should be easy to start and identify their interest quickly. 6.02 as an oral compound, it's a capsule, and so that is probably more like a 3 to 4 year timeline. Only because there's more work to be done. There's more imaging that it has to occur, CTs, PET scans, X-rays, and so forth. It just takes longer to both accrue those patients and also to evaluate those patients. And so that's what extends that out a little bit more.
Now, now this the wellness side and the pharmaceutical side for Ionics NextGen, they have something in common between both of those sides. Not just cancer, the central element that kind of is part of all of this is something that really becomes part of your identity, doesn't it?
It does. So the kind of the um, I guess unifying factor here is we started our research actually in a way that's similar to how drug research used to occur, let's say 30, 40 years ago. And ours came from a plant that was just found in nature, grows wild actually in the hills in and around Jerusalem, Israel. And so it's very much native to Israel, Palestine area. And we started to identify and really unpack what is in that plant because it's been used what we would think of as an old home remedy here in the United States. It's been used for about 11 centuries, so dating all the way back in the medical literature of the day to the 9th century AD. That's really what caught our attention, frankly. If there's nothing to it, if there's no efficacy to it, you would think that it has died out to history a long time ago, but it's still actually in continuous use even today. There's a study out there that says 22% of Palestinians with a cancer diagnosis currently use that product and they brew it as a tea over in that part of the world um, as part of their cancer treatment regimen. So almost a quarter of Palestinians with a cancer diagnosis. That's interesting. And so we started to unpack what was in the plant, and lo and behold, just naturally occurring molecules in the plant. We found three that we really liked for cancer, and those three actually are what became our drugs that we're studying in clinical trials now. They're fully synthetic molecules, but the naturally occurring molecules that are in our plant, which become one of the ingredients in the nutraceutical, are exactly what a cancer patient would be getting in a clinical trial as well.
And probably very similar to what they're getting over in Palestine with the tea, right?
It is. So we retrofitted it, I guess, for our purposes here in the United States, and we converted it to a powderized capsule, the nutraceutical, I mean. And so because the tea, there's just no way to sugarcoat this. That tea tastes terrible. It must be good for you because of how bad it tastes. But we said let's make it into a capsule. It'll be a little easier to ship and a little bit easier for people to use at home. And so that's what we do now with that product.
That's
Uh,
fantastic. How many drugs these days have that kind of a history, right?
it's interesting. There's quite a few drugs on the market today. There's some breast cancer drugs actually that have a background in botanicals. Digoxin is a rather well-known drug that actually has its roots, no pun intended, that was terrible, I'm sorry, in a plant called foxglove. And so, yeah, these are common, back in the day, maybe less so today in terms of today's drug research, but we believe that, and this is something of a guiding principle for our organization, there's still a lot left to discover in nature. And mankind has been, reaping the benefits of what's available to them medicinally in nature for many, many years. And there's no reason that that can't continue. And so far, our story has been, another example of that in a long line of them.
There's also a family element of this, isn't there?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. My father is actually our kind of chief founder, chief chemist. He's a PhD medicinal chemist and actually grew up in the Middle East. He was born in Jerusalem and came to the United States as a 17-year-old to go to college. And his original goal was med school. Turns out biology classes are all in English, and his English was lousy, so he gravitated more towards the chemistry and mathematics side of the equation, and but still maintain that passion for the medical community. And so we had a business. It was a chemistry focused business in an entirely different industry altogether. But we built that company up over about 35 years, and had a very sizable exit in 2013. It's public. I'll go ahead and share that with you. It was a $300 million exit in 2013. And his view, and I actually just heard him tell this story earlier today. His view was, he came to the United States with $200 in his pocket and a one-way ticket. There was no going home. And so, United States being a land of opportunity, he said, "Let me figure out a way to give back." And so, this is the way that he's giving back is through trying to create a drug that we can put into the hands of the oncologists, and a nutraceuticals line, which we can put into the hands of the everyday consumer to help them, deal with whatever health issue they're facing. So that's what we decided to do with the proceeds of that exit that we had back in 2013. We're not the retiring type, I guess. So
Your brother is also involved in the business, isn't he?
he is. He's actually the author of the topical compound. He's a dermatologist and dermatopathologist, and he's on faculty as a member of the Texas Tech School of Medicine, and then in his spare time, obviously works full time here as well. So it's very much a family enterprise, and my background is in biology as an undergrad. Have a law degree and an MBA. So I try to help, kind of steer things from behind the scenes as well. So yeah, it's very much a family enterprise every
Not
day.
not bad brain DNA in that family, huh?
I got to give it up probably to dad as well as my mom. She doesn't love the limelight, but she's equally responsible if there's any credit to be had for sure.
Let's talk about some things that investors are always interested in. Revenue. Now, revenue is always a difficult subject to bring up for pharmaceutical companies because they're burning cash that's
Mhm.
coming in and they're burning it, and that happens until they get a result. But your business is a little bit different because of that structure that we talked about earlier. So even though you are still raising funds, and this is also important to investors. You've already raised how much? 75 million, is that correct?
75 million to date. Of course, our family put in seed capital, and then once we got it to a point where we felt comfortable we could bring in outside investors, we felt comfortable that there's a there, and that there's reality to what we had been seeing preclinically in all of our testing, and so then we opened it up to outside investment as well.
So it's important to kind of distinguish for our investors that this is not kind of an idea that just sprung up. This is a company that is fairly mature at this point and close to potential exits in terms of investor participation. That's a very exciting place to be, but also there's a lot of pressure there. And I imagine that revenue that's coming in on the wellness side certainly helps, doesn't it?
It certainly helps. And so we don't, we pay to keep the lights on, keep continuing to manufacture the products. We actually manufacture all of the nutraceuticals ourselves internally, in part because we're very fussy about quality. And we don't want to be on somebody else's manufacturer, waiting list. And we just don't know when that we may hit that tipping point where folks, discover us and our sales hopefully start to climb, and we want to be in charge of that manufacturing and supply chain as much as possible. And so, yeah, we just pay to keep the lights on, keep our people paid, and then all the rest of the proceeds of the nutraceuticals are funneled back into drug development. It's good, but it's certainly not enough to really fund everything that we want to accomplish on the drug development side. And so that's in part the reason for this capital fundraising effort. And the other idea too is let's also grow that nutraceuticals business, because it's an incredible industry. So much changed with COVID. So much more interest is there in people taking ownership of their health in a more proactive way. And so nutraceuticals, and specifically some of the products that we think are really relevant to people, such as our glucose product and our inflammation product and so forth. These are all things that they're really receiving, I think, somewhat renewed interest, especially amongst the baby boomers, the millennials especially, and Gen Z too. They're up and coming as well.
Now, we talked a little bit about exit opportunities. Can you just briefly kind of, we throw around trials quite a bit, but there's a very specific numbered stages that these go through, and kind of if you could kind of go through that quickly, just give the investors an opportunity to understand where the two drugs that you have kind of
Mhm.
fit there,
Yeah.
just for reference.
Yeah, you bet. Just, I guess from a classical sense, it's phase one, phase two, phase three, and typically drugs, if it's a Tylenol or an ibuprofen or something like that, there would be pretty clear delineations between those each of those stages, and then typically they would become commercialized after phase three clinical trial. Um, in our case, cancer, and because everything has to be slightly different and more complicated in cancer, there's actually these kind of almost in between trial stages. And that's why I referred earlier to phase 1B. It's sort of a hybrid between phase one and phase two. Phase one is the kind of the earliest human clinical trial. They also call it first in human studies. And that's basically you've done all your preclinical work, you've tested it in petri dish and mice and rats and so forth, and higher order animal life forms until you satisfy yourselves that it is safe, or at least we believe it's safe to take by humans. And then you enter into what's called the dose escalation phase, meaning you increase the dose to a point where you start to see side effects, and you're kind of looking for that in the oncology space, because the goal with the oncology drugs is to take as much of it as you possibly can, but not one bit more, because you don't want to cause undesirable side effects. Flip side, Tylenol, you want to take as little Tylenol as possible to get rid of your headache. So it's kind of the inverse of other types of drug development. Um, Phase two is typically all about exploring efficacy. So phase one is all about safety. Phase two is all about efficacy. And then phase three is a broader number of trial patients and trial participants, just to get some clarity and some comfort that it is, going to work on a grander scale. Um, and so in our situation, we believe that commercialization could occur as early as at the end of phase two.
Okay. So now, in terms of kind of competitive advantages that you think you kind of bring, one of the things that's really important when you're dealing with pharmaceuticals is certainly IP.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about your patent strategy?
Mhm. Yep. So we, the intellectual property coverage, I think of as kind of just some of your basic fundamentals. These are basic blocking and tackling. Every drug company must do it, and just so happens in our previous industry, we got very good at patenting and very astute at how to navigate the rules of the patent world, both nationally, domestically, I should say, and also globally. And so our products, our drug products in particular, are, the main idea is patented, and then we actually go the next step of patenting what they say all around that main idea. Meaning, I don't want to let anybody get close to my invention, and so I patent derivations on that same main idea and the theme of that main idea. And so, your patent, it might be one patent, but it actually looks like a set of encyclopedias. It's a very large document.
Right.
Uh, and so, when we also have coverage in pretty much every jurisdiction out there around the globe, with the exception of only a couple of countries that really don't represent a problem in terms of not having coverage, like North Korea, as an example.
Now, we've talked about your team, steeped in knowledge and with prior exit experience. That's always really important to investors. Let's just kind of wrap this up by talking about this particular Reg D opportunity. How much are you raising in this 506C?
Just over 10 million in this the Reg D. And then obviously, the next step for us is a Regulation A raise, where we'd open it up to a broader audience of unaccredited as well.
That certainly makes sense. Now, the way that they can invest, they can go to, you have a website set up that has all information. They can download the PPM and they can even start their investment there, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
And
And
that
let me get that.
URL is
Yeah, sorry about that. Let me get that one brought back up here real quick. So it's,
investinnextgen.com, right?
yes, yeah, that is
You,
correct.
there you have it. You can also reach out to me. We are acting as the broker of record. We're doing investor outreach for NextGen. So you can set up a one-on-one call with me and we can actually run through all of the particulars of this offering. Um, and if you go to investinnextgen.com, you'll be able to download, as I said, that PPM. That's very, very important. You'll be able to understand all of the risks associated with any investment. There are always quite a few, and certainly in the pharmaceutical field, there's more of those. Now we're going into the Q&A section. I talked about that earlier. I don't see any open questions yet, but this now would be the time to do it. So if anyone has any questions that they'd like Jason or I to answer, I can certainly talk to compliance issues, and Jason can certainly talk about the company. So if anyone has any questions, otherwise, I'm just going to kind of run through a few questions that I had. So we talk a lot about, Jason, how this type of model, this dual platform where you're using kind of similar resources to fuel a pharmaceutical side as well as a wellness side. Why isn't this model more widely adopted in biotech?
You know, I think there's a couple of different reasons for that, maybe, and this is pure speculation on my part, of course, but it's interesting. There's a paradigm in this space, and it's essentially that pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals um, are seemingly at odds sometimes. The hardcore pharmaceutical development guys kind of look down on the hardcore nutraceutical guys, and vice versa. And frankly, I don't know that that necessarily ever made much sense to me because at the end of the day, this is all just molecules. And if we talk in terms of dietary supplements being a health food, um, well, spinach is a health food and it's made up of healthy molecules. Nobody would say don't eat spinach, from a healthcare perspective. And so I think that these things can make very good, very effective bedfellows, frankly. And people can benefit from both the more, proactive, maybe on the nutraceutical side, and maybe a little bit more reactive on the pharmaceutical side. And we want to be both. We want to be there for people in both scenarios.
So the nature of what ties those two sets of
Yeah.
treatments together is what, gave you that platform design, which
Mhm.
worked certainly well for you.
Yeah.
Um, how does it change the risk profile for one of the investors that might be considering putting some money into NextGen?
It's we hope that what we've built here is it allows us to offer something that's very unique to maybe the investor who might otherwise invest in just a pharmaceutical company or just a nutraceuticals company because um, there's two different kinds of risk. There regulatory risk on the one hand, there's marketing risk on the other with nutraceuticals. And so, pharmaceuticals is just kind of the quintessential binary bet. You have typically one drug. In our case, we have two, which we think ups our chances. And it's really just a very fine line between hero and goat is the way I say it. It can be all going very very well, and then you get a bad piece of data back in a trial, and all of a sudden it causes you to look at your drug platform with less than a rosy picture. And so from our vantage point, we want to be able to offer to the investor something that is not such a harsh investment environment where one misstep and it's all over with. And so we think we can be successful in both, but we want to essentially hedge our bets, if you will, and say if one doesn't go so well, then we have the other one to back up, as a backup. And if they both go well, then everybody's happy, really
And
happy.
we had in an earlier conversation we had talked about um, kind of where they were in terms of exiting and things like that. Um, that represents a real opportunity for investors. And we've talked about kind of where that can happen, and there are multiple points and multiple places where investors can actually achieve a profit, which is exciting. Um, One of the things that's difficult when you're raising funds, and here we're raising $10 million, you've raised 75 million in total.
Mhm.
As that money comes in, there are major decisions that have to be made about where that money goes. What's the
Mhm.
allocation? And I imagine that that's a difficult process. Can you talk a little bit about what went into the thought process behind your allocation for this $10 million raise?
Yeah, it's you're right. It is very difficult. It's really, I think, back thinking back to that pie chart that I showed briefly a bit ago. I think our first thought is the topical compound is the closest to the finish line right now. And if we can doing whatever we can to accelerate that, and get to that finish line faster, that means, quicker value inflection point, quicker capital, commercialization strategy for that drug. And that's probably where the smart money goes. And then also too, at the end of the day as well, if we have to make decisions about where to put money, the next place I would probably go is oddly enough, the marketing for the nutraceuticals. We've built the business and the reputation of the business within the industry, we hope smartly, and we've become known as one of the companies that's really dedicated to science and scientific proof of what we're telling people, that this will help with their glucose levels. This will help with their cellular health, normal cellular function, um, inflammation and so forth. I would like to be able to take that a step further and broaden the marketing of it, get more people to know about what we're doing. That's one of the bigger challenges in the B2C world, is just getting the consumer space to know that you exist, and becoming top of mind when it comes to their supplement needs. So we think we're kind of standing a bit on the precipice of that, and a little bit of marketing dollar would go a very, very long way to then generating significant returns on that investment of the marketing dollar. So
For those
those two in particular.
for those potential investors that are here, one thing we'd love to see in a question potentially, what are the hurdles that you see to potentially investing in this? You've come to this webinar that certainly shows an interest in the topic area. You certainly are considering an investment in NextGen. What would hold you back? If that would be a question that we could address, that would be great from one of you. But let's until we have one of those, Jason. Let's talk a little bit about what's the ideal type of investor that this opportunity would speak to. Is this like a tremendously speculative shot in the dark? Is this, where does it fit in the kind of risk profile of an investor?
I would say in all transparency, we're still considered what you call an early stage pharmaceutical company. I think the thing that makes us different and maybe de-risks, or hopefully de-risks it, greatly, is the fact that we are trying to do both. And thus far we've been successful in doing both. Most companies to they don't get to phase one, let alone through phase one. And so we've done that now with our first two drugs. So in that sense,
Let's say that again.
it's
First
very unique. Yeah,
two drugs.
first
That
two
is
drugs.
incredibly impressive.
Yeah, that's it's sort of like hitting, a grand slam at your first at bat in the majors. It's a big deal. And then we did it twice.
Yeah.
But we also know that there's still work to be done, right? And so, I think that, from our vantage point, we see the steps needed, and we know how to build businesses, we know how to scale those businesses. But I think the ideal investor is someone who, um, you know, comes in and maybe they have, B2C expertise and would like to get involved. I'd love to have those phone calls. Maybe they've seen, drug development in other contexts, or maybe medical devices. Would love to hear their thoughts on those things. So we're not necessarily just looking for somebody to write a check. If we would love to have expertise come into the business as well. But obviously we know that we're not so early and so new that it's a complete shot in the dark, or really just a roll of the dice. But again, on the same token, it's not like, an investment in utilities, or things like that, where it's kind of a very sure bet. So I'd say we're somewhere in between, but hopefully the risk profile is also counterbalanced by the potential for reward as well on the back end.
Where there are a lot of pharmaceutical companies that are going to be boom or bust,
Yeah.
you're not ever going to be bust because you've got a fallback option that is always going to give you a floor there, and that floor can
Mhm.
increase,
Yes. Yes.
well, which is exciting. That's why that $400 billion addressable market on the wellness side is so
Hmm.
important.
Yeah.
Uh, for an investor that's coming in here. Now,
Hmm.
we talked, Jason, about the difficult decisions that you and your team have to face, not just for this raise, but at every point, entering trials, going through trials. There's a lot of pressure on the decisions that you're making, the patent decisions, all of that. But talk about like what fuels you right now. It must be tremendously exciting to be at the wheel of a company that is sitting at this stage. Can you talk a little bit about that and what kind of gets you up in the morning?
I was just going to say it's amazing to me. I think I have the best job in the world, and I won't tell anybody else this, but they wouldn't have to pay me. I would still come to work. You know, it's interesting when you have the ability to touch so many people's lives. It's a significant responsibility, but it's also, um, I guess I would call it an honor I mean, not to sound too hokey about it, but it really is kind of an honor to get up and go to work every day. And it's not hard to get out of bed. You have the ability to help people, and I could tell you stories for days about people that have come into our office just strictly on the nutraceutical side, and they heard about what we're doing, and they know the backstory of the molecule and how the molecule is derived from a plant and then synthesized from a plant, and so forth. And so they understand. And I would say probably 80% of our nutraceuticals customers are using the product for some form of cancer diagnosis. So, without talking too much about it, since it's kind of heavily regulated, but I can't tell you the number of times people have come into our office in a very dire circumstance. And about 4 months later, they'll come out and see us again, and they'll say, "I just wanted you to know that I got the all clear from my oncologist. I am in remission, and I, no evidence of disease." And most of those folks are using the product in conjunction with some other form of chemo, and so forth. But some of them aren't. And those conversations have happened by now hundreds of times. And sorry, long answer to a short question, but I think it's really interesting. We are doing something that I think is very rare, and I think we're very aware of that every day. So we like to help people, and we're going to try to do it on as grand a scale as we can do it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that rare opportunity. The investors that are here today at this webinar, that they have an opportunity to get involved here. And that's a very different opportunity than was presented to your early investors that came in a while ago. Talk about kind of this time and what an opportunity this represents for investors now, as opposed to coming in the earlier money.
I think, of course, the earlier investors, they were probably taking a little bit bigger risk. But at the end of the day, I think what we've seen thus far and what kind of our outlook on what the future holds, we're feeling more and more bullish all the time about what we can accomplish in nutraceuticals, what we can accomplish with specifically the topical drug in particular. Because my brother is a practicing dermatologist, he gets to deal with this every day. And so he's treating patients with the products that ultimately our topical compound would eventually compete with. And, he's very excited about the potential that is, that is represented by our topical compound. And he sees the side effects that his patients have to deal with. And I think, kind of behind closed doors, he's shared with me, many times that it's painful for him to see as a clinician. But unfortunately, that's really some of the only tools in his toolbox that he has in order to deal with these various conditions that his patients have. And so for us to be able to offer something different, something that doesn't, in his words, turn your face into hamburger. It's really, really tough. I mean, some of these are the pictures that he has shown me, just from textbooks and things are kind of heartbreaking. And it's interesting because that kind of becomes a two-edged sword. Number one, people don't want to do that, and because of the side effects. And number two, they stop doing it because it hurts and because it's a bad side effect. So it's kind of a double whammy in the sense that it doesn't get the opportunity to work like it should. And so in our case, we can be much easier on the skin, and the side effect won't be nearly as bad. And also what they call patient adherence, or just continuing to take the drug as directed, will continue, and that will give us more opportunity to be effective against eczema and actinic keratosis and psoriasis and so forth. So I'm hoping that we can give guys like him and other dermatologists all around the world the opportunity to give their patients something new and different.
And I say to the investors, isn't it refreshing to have a team that not only is adept at handling the money, they've shepherded a $300 million exit, but they are passionate about what they are supposed to be, the cure. They're not so focused on the money that they lose focus on what the most important thing is, which is the people. And I love that about this team. I love that about this solution. This Reg D opportunity is there for all of you. There are some last kind of pieces that we'd like to leave you with. This is a platform designed for both near-term returns and long-term upside. There are three calls to action we'd like to leave you all with. Go to investinnextgen.com, peruse all of the information on that site, download the PPM, read the PPM, make a decision to invest, and then go and click on Invest Now, and you can invest now right from that same location. Also, remind people that they can set up calls with myself. My contact information is right there on the screen, and you're welcome to email me. You're welcome to call me, and we can continue this conversation beyond the walls of this webinar. And thank you, Jason, for your words and your passion today. Thank you, investors, for coming and listening through this entire time. And we look forward to hearing from you in the future. I hope you all enjoyed today's webinar, and thank you and have a great day.
Take care. Thanks, Ben.